Okay, we need to talk about a dirty little secret in grief, and that's anger. Everybody has it. It is not something to be ashamed of, but it is something we need to talk about. I love conversations about anger. Like, anger is this thing that you're not supposed to stay in, right? If we think about the stages of grief for a minute, we know that the stages of grief are garbage in general. But if you're not sure why I say the stages of grief are hot garbage, check out this video and learn all about it. Now, back to where does anger fit into this conversation? Even within that made-up hierarchy of the stages of grief, there are favorite children in that hierarchy, right? Like, acceptance is the one that we all want to get to. We understand that you might be numb sometimes or in denial, but anger, while we understand that it's a normal and expected part of your grief process, don't get stuck there. Don't stay angry for too long, right? Anger is so disrespected in the world of emotions, in the world of human culture, right? Anger is this really dangerous thing. It is unseemly, it is unevolved. It's not a place that you want to stay, even if we are generous enough to say that we understand that anger is a normal, natural human response. We're so quick to put a lid on it and shut it up. If you want to learn more about anger, like the full nerd out scope of it, be sure to check out Rage Becomes Her by my friend Soraya Chemaly. It is a fascinating body of work on the intersection of women and misogyny and culture and anger. We're not going to go fully into that today in our time here, but I do want to scratch the surface of our ideas about anger, how those intersect with our ideas about grief, and what to do if you are so angry that you feel like you can burn down the world. So let's talk about why anger gets a bad rap in this culture. If you think about it, the only images that we have of anger are usually angry white men yelling at somebody else or smashing a wall, or like basically this really destructive force of anger that is explosive and unhinged and not communicating anything healthy, right? Like, if the only image that we have of anger is this destructive, explosive, violent, abusive flavor, of course we're going to hide our own anger. Of course we're going to silence anger in somebody else because we're afraid of it. We think it's this big destructive force. And honestly, that kind of big destructive force is anger that has no other place to go. That's like, if you think about volcanoes. If you think about volcanoes, that is pressure, 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 pressure that still has energy to it, and the only option available is eruption. That is the tail end of anger. That sort of vengeful, explosive, destructive expression is what happens when you don't let a normal, healthy, expected emotion have the space that it needs to express itself, to be honored and listened to and heard. Anger is a sense of injustice, right? We get angry about the things that feel unfair. Whether they are empirically unfair or not is not the point, right? When we feel like a line has been crossed or something has been unfairly done to us, we've been portrayed in the wrong way, or somebody failed and that's why our person died, right? There has been a wrong committed. Anger is a natural, healthy response to feeling like there's an injustice here. Right? Anger is the fuel that says, let's kick this shit over. Let's talk about this injustice. Let's do something about this violation. Anger is fuel to correct what has been damaged or violated or trespassed against. Again, it doesn't matter whether that is empirically factual or not, right? What we're saying here is that when you feel angry, when you feel anger come up in you, the question is not, or the issue is not, how do I turn this off? How do I shut this down? How do I evolve into something better, higher, whatever? It is, where do I feel trespassed against? What feels unfair or unjust to me? And can I listen to that? Can I listen to that anger instead of shushing it and silencing it or hiding it for very good reasons sometimes? Can I listen to that and find out, what do I need in response to this? What do I need when I feel this sense of outrage? How do I channel it in such a way that it doesn't have to explode all over the poor bank teller who had nothing to do with whatever's going on for you? If you don't come into a relationship with your anger will find other ways to speak. This is why we have epidemics of interpersonal violence and domestic violence. Like that's a whole other big issue, but there is something about the maligning of natural, healthy anger that twists that feeling of injustice and turns it into pain, that the only option available for that pain and that sense of injustice is damage. We need to start reclaiming anger as information and as necessary fuel to kick over the forms and the ways of relating to each other that perpetuate injustice. Okay, I'm gonna get off of the big cultural scope of anger, misappropriation, misidentification soapbox and talk about what does this mean for you as a grieving person. So anger is a really huge part of grief. I'm not surprised that it's in the stages of grief because remember, those stages of grief are, here are some things that lots of people experience. Maybe you're experiencing them too. Anger is a really typical, normal experience inside of grief. If your person was 97 years old, they had an incredible life, and they died when they were ready to go, you can still feel angry, even if maybe that doesn't seem like an unjust death. Anger doesn't have to make logical sense. It makes emotional sense. It makes relational sense. If you feel angry about what has happened, even if it is able to be considered a normal, natural Western lifespan death, your anger is still valid. If there was an accident or negligence or a violent crime or something else that is truly an injustice, of course you're angry. So step number one here is don't silence yourself. Recognize that your feelings of anger are valid. They are deserving of your care and attention. They deserve a place to speak. There's a whole section in my book, How to Carry What Can't Be Fixed, a Guided Journal for Grief. The whole center section of that is a double page spread on here's a space for your anger to express itself. You deserve places for your anger to speak, to express itself, to write it out, to stab through the pages of your book. Do not stab through any animate objects, of course, like we don't want to be destroying things, but a lot of people need to do something physical, forceful with that feeling. There's nothing wrong with that. Anger is energy. Anger is emotion. It is, as I said a minute ago, that fuel that makes us advocates, that makes us fight for the things that we need and want in the world. So finding places for your anger to be expressed, whether that is writing or boxing, or one of my particular favorites is smashing things. Wear your safety goggles though, safety first. Friends, even with letting anger have a voice. My point here is that practice of recognizing and honoring your own anger, whether or not somebody from the outside would see it as logical or reasonable or not the point, but making space for that anger to have a voice. Move your body in whatever ways your body is able to move. I, as I said, love smashing things. So like going to the recycling center and taking your glass and whipping it down there into those big pits and getting that satisfying smash sound. That seems really silly. Don't underestimate the power of embodying your anger. Don't turn it back in on yourself. That will show up, whether that shows up in body aches and pains or stress-related illnesses or strained relationships or unloading at the bank teller who had nothing to do with your day or your grief or your loss, right? Like basically ride that dragon. Don't let that dragon run the show. There is nothing wrong with your anger. It needs attention and it needs care and it deserves a place to speak so that it doesn't have to become explosive. Now, having said that, let's talk about explosive anger. Let's talk about rage, because this is a reality. Things happen to us. Maybe your grief was caused by a violent crime or Maybe you are furious about the way that you're being treated inside your grief. Anger inside grief doesn't just come from the loss itself. Very often it comes from the ways that you're treated as a grieving people. That's an injustice. The way that people are failing, whether they have good intentions or not, the way that people are failing to hear you or see you or support you, that is a feeling of injustice, and feeling enraged about that is really common. In fact, most of the DMs, most of the comments that I get on social media are like, I am so angry at the way that I'm being treated, or the way that my family is being treated, or we're being gaslit in our grief. Anger about the ways that you're being treated as a grieving person. I think if we could somehow poll every grieving person in the world, they would say, yeah, I'm mad at that. How do we not let that get explosive and destructive and burn down the social relational world? Well, surprising no one, I'm gonna say first you need to recognize that it's happening. Recognize this is bringing up so much white hot rage for me. The way that people keep telling me I need to be over this by now, the way that people say, well, you should have known that this was gonna happen with the kinds of risks that you, like, whatever. Recognizing, of course, I am furious about this. It's not fair and it's not right and I don't deserve it. Don't silence that for yourself. I think very often we have this narrative that we have absorbed that says good people don't get angry, they're doing the best they can, they have the best of intentions, like turning down the volume on your anger because it's not what a good person does. Yeah, you gotta let go of that idea that not being angry is the evolved choice. That's garbage. That's garbage. Anger only needs to become explosive when we don't let it have the space that it needs as a natural process. That doesn't mean that you go to your great aunt Martha when you are angry and unleash on them. You still need to apply skill. You still need to be respectful, but there are ways to speak about the injustice, speak about the things that are bringing up that anger in ways that are clear and direct and well-boundaried and well-skilled. We don't have just two options. We never do. There is nothing about being human that is this or that, black or white, binaries only, nothing. Just because you're angry doesn't mean your only two options are destroy or silence. There is a really big middle ground in there, and it starts with awareness. Step 2, reminding yourself that this is a normal, healthy response, and being curious about where is my sense of injustice? What does that look like? What boundary has been violated, and what do I need to do about it? Step 3, once you know what that sense of injustice is what do I want to do about this? Is this a situation where I can advocate for myself, where I can communicate, where I can say, stop, enough? If it's not safe, or it wouldn't do anything, or you can't get that doctor on the phone, how am I going to take care of myself and this anger in other ways? Because it needs to go somewhere. It can't go to the place I think it belongs, but that doesn't mean it shouldn't exist. Where else can I go with it? If it turns out, yeah, actually it's not comfortable, but I can talk to my dad about how I feel and how angry I am when every time I see him, he asks when I'm going to get married again, then let's bring some skill to that. Let's figure out, how do I say this to this person in a way that is respectful and well-boundaried and clear? How do I communicate my anger in a way that is a force of advocacy for myself? Anger is a sense of injustice, and the action we can take from that anger is advocacy. It's fighting for what's right. It's fighting for what we believe, and it's fighting for what we need. Anger is not the bad guy. Find places for it to speak, find places for you to honor it, and apply some skill, and anger is pretty great.